Vas a grabar, ¿no, Dana?
Sí, ahí se está grabando.
Ok, perfecto.
Y ahora ya partimos y ya está la gente metiéndose.
Están entrando. ¿Quieres dar la introducción, Dana?
Voy a partir. Voy a tiro. No era el tiempo.
Perfecto.
Bueno,
Ahí
voy.
están entrando.
Bien, espera un poquito. Dale. Vale, 35. Ya, voy a partir con la introducción y a presentar a todas.
Masoma,
Ya.
¿cómo estás, Masoma? Your micro.
Ya, vamos a partir. Yo soy Dana Gilov, directora de Política y Educación de la Federación de Estudiantes Judíos. Le doy la bienvenida a todos y todas. Muchas gracias por estar acá. Vamos a tener un ciclo de charlas, un poquito express, de feminismo y diversidad en Medio Oriente con expositores y expositoras de primer nivel. Nuestro moderador va a ser Manuel Férez, que es profesor de Medio Oriente y Cáucaso de la Universidad Internacional de Cuernavaca. Vamos a partir con Huzan. Huzan es una feminista kurda, escritora, conferencista y editora de Kurdish Women Stories. Ella nació en Kurdistán del Sur, es activista política y también lucha por los derechos de las mujeres y del feminismo kurdo. Después vamos a seguir con Samira. Samira es abogada de derechos humanos enfocada a las mujeres azerbaiyanas de Georgia. Es abogada de la Universidad Europea de Tiflis y de la Facultad de Ciencias Sociales y Políticas de la Universidad Estatal de la misma ciudad. Y actualmente está haciendo una maestría en políticas públicas. Ella se encarga de es abogada en derechos humanos y se enfoca en las mujeres de Georgia. Después vamos a seguir con Masoma. Masoma es una mujer afgana, nació en Afganistán en 1986. Como una niña hazara, fue adoptada por una familia austriaca. Y después de haber sido gravemente herida en la guerra civil, ahora se dedica a luchar por el feminismo de las mujeres afganas y también por la discriminación que vive en el exilio, o sea, como en la diáspora ahora y también de las mujeres afganas. Y vamos a terminar con Jorge Jacobson. Jorge Jacobson es un experto en género en Israel y Palestina. Va a hablar de la resistencia e identidad y es periodista israelí de origen argentino. Convive con su pareja y 3 hijos y es partícipe en iniciativas que promueven los derechos de la comunidad gay en Israel. También es un codirector de Medio Oriente News, de Oriente Medio News. Y eso, ahora le doy el espacio a Manuel, que bueno, va a moderar esta mini entrevista express.
Bueno, muchachos, muchas gracias, Housan, Samira, Masoma, to be here with us. For us, it's very important to hear you because we have to listen other experience of the Middle East. We used to hear about the Palestinian and Israeli conflict only, but it's very important to hear another perspective. So the idea is to talk 20 minutes each. The first speaker will be Housan. After that will be Samira. After that, Masoma. And I ask all of you, les pido a todos ustedes, los asistentes que están aquí con nosotros, enviar sus preguntas por el chat conforme vayan pasando las charlas. Send to us your questions by the chat here in Zoom so we can share it with our speakers. So please, Housan, for us it's a pleasure to have you here. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Manuel and Dana, for organizing this. I'm really grateful to share this platform with other amazing speakers. And it's very important, as you mentioned as well, to speak about other issues and problems and struggles and revolutionary momentums within the Middle East, because when we talk about the so-called Middle East, although it's a creation, that term, it's a bit problematic politically speaking. All we hear about is that killing and suffering, and people are shown as vulnerable, lacking agency and so on. But actually, despite all the problems, people still do organize, and there are various revolutionary struggles going on within each country in the Middle East. However, I'm going to speak about the feminisms, I would say, within the Kurdish context, although it's very difficult to pin down and say that there's this particular feminism within Kurdistan or Kurdish women and so on, because I think it's problematic in several ways, because as it is, we don't have one united, particular Kurdistan. We are divided between 4 nation states: Iran, Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. And that division has created different forms of struggle within the Kurdish sections of those 4 countries. Therefore, the women's struggles from time to time, it changes. Sometimes they have to be part, or they are really constituting a very large part of the struggle against the oppressive colonizing nation states in each part of Kurdistan. But also there's another struggle that we have to wage, is Kurdish patriarchy as well. That is the same almost everywhere in the world. You have patriarchy worldwide, different societies and deal with it in different ways. And there are various struggles and feminisms around the world, in my opinion. But to the word feminism itself, the way we know it in the Western context, is very different in Kurdistan, for various reasons. I mean, people like me started writing or talking about feminism in 2000 onwards, from 2000 onwards, because before that, Iraq was still under the regime of Saddam Hussein, and both Kurdistan and the rest of Iraq, really, people didn't have much access to the outside world, to the knowledge production, and to so many things. And I don't have to speak about Saddam's dictator. It was a horrible dictator. In Kurdistan, we had an armed struggle against Saddam's regime. We had women's presence in terms of their political presence, but they were part of political parties, be it nationalist parties or leftist groups and so on. So their struggle was mainly within political parties, whereas there weren't many in autonomous, really women-specific groups to work only within the framework of feminism or within the framework of women's rights activism as such. But after 1991, and more specifically after 2003, with the fall of regime of Saddam, the society opened up more, and there are many more groups and NGOs and so on. Obviously, when we talk about the current situation now in Iraqi Kurdistan, that's where I am from, we call it South Kurdistan, Bashur. You have various political agendas and interests. You have the NGOs or civil society groups who are backed and supported by, let's say, imperialists, by Western governments, and then the only activities they do is what the funders' program is supposed to be, basically. So they don't really talk much about feminism or things like that. They do provide services here and here. They do carry out workshops, seminars, things like that, but it's mainly to do with 1325, women in politics, women representation, woman quota, these type of regular activities that I think is the same case everywhere where there are foreign governments investing, basically. There are also other political parties who are in the Kurdish regional government. They each have their own women group who are more or less advocate for their party's agenda. But outside of those, people like us, really advocate for feminism from a very female-centered point of view, a Kurdish woman's point of view, and how they see themselves, how they see the world, how they analyze and theorize the political and social and economical problems and questions and things that arise every time, every now and then. So I think that's why I gave this background, just to really say that it's not a homogeneous society where there's one Kurdish people, one struggle, one woman's question, one woman's struggle, one feminism, one so on and so forth. It isn't. The society is diverse. Women's opinions are diverse. Women's agendas and interests are diverse as well. I mean, you have women who are in power, who have access to power and money and so on, so that they feel more empowered, really, individually speaking, than the rest of the women in society who are powerless, who are disempowered, in my opinion, and who don't have access to either politics or to services or even to so many things in society. So I think, you know, class plays a very big role in this. Your class position, in my opinion, determines your chances in life, like many societies, unfortunately. Also, your gender, your sex, for example, because there's still so much discrimination going on, and still females have to, you know, struggle and to fight to create spaces for themselves in society, as well as to have a voice outside of all these agendas that I have already spoken about. There are various cultural initiatives, literary initiatives led by young girls, more of a younger generation, I would say. They are creating voluntary, autonomous initiatives, reading book clubs, literary groups, societies, cultural websites. Like we, for example, created Culture Project, which is looking at various issues from a feminist perspective, be it art, cultural production, politics, and so on. So I think more and more of these initiatives are emerging because I think there is a need for fresh thinking. There is a need for a different perspective, not only party politics or, you know, those who have an NGO supported by the West and so on. So I think in our region, it's very important to have our own authentic voices and to work within the context that we are living in, as well as for the solutions and for the analyzing and theorizing of the situation should come from the ground itself, from the Kurdish context itself, because really, I cannot speak about the Kurdish context without speaking about colonialism and colonization by four nation states, but also the Western intervention here in our region that has really created so much problem, and we had to struggle for over 100 years for just national liberation. And lately in Kurdistan of Turkey and Syria, where there's more, you know, political intervention and struggle by the Kurdish people, and especially in Rojava, they have created their own version of women's theorizing and kind of scientific endeavor called genealogy, which is in my opinion, an important initiative to actually women themselves through it's a self-taught initiative, and that women are learning, theorizing and analyzing Kurdish women, and they believe in female struggle against patriarchy, against capitalism, and they put the issue of ecology at the center of their struggle, which I'm sure you all know about these things about the Rojava struggle. I don't need to go into further detail, but just to tell you that there are the variety of initiatives and opinions within Kurdish society in different parts. And that's why I think I cannot claim, or I cannot say there is just one particular women's movement, one particular feminism, one particular, viewpoint about why women are for example, oppressed and what's going on. I mean, you have feminists who think that feminism should accommodate nationalism because Kurdish people are still colonized by different regimes. There are other feminists who think that for a very long time, Kurdish nationalism has been co-opting the women's question in the service of national liberation. That's why we fall behind. So there are various discussions and viewpoints, which I think it's important to consider in the case of the Kurdish people, because it's a very, it's an exceptional case, in my opinion. We are the largest nation without a state. And up to this moment, we still suffer one genocide after another. And I'm sure you all know that. I mean, we Kurds in my part were subjected to genocide by Saddam's regime. Now Erdogan is committing genocide in Afrin. Syria's regime totally, for example, erased Kurdish identity and culture and language and everything. So in Turkey, again, it's a similar case whereby elected politicians are all put in prison just because they are Kurdish, and then there is a lot of massacre and there seemed genocide. Also in Iran is a similar case where you have assimilation, forced assimilationist policies by successive regimes. So you have really, as women, as Kurdish women speaking, even personally speaking, you have all these historical and political questions and problems and upheavals, and you are put in front of them really. And it's very difficult not to consider them and just say, I'm a feminist, I don't care about the national liberation struggle, or I don't care about the class struggle, or I don't care about this. I mean, you have a class-based society, you have a sex-based discrimination and oppression, you have a colonized society by different colonizers. So you really are dealing with all these questions. You have questions of internal racism, of course, and different struggles going on. So I think as a feminist, as someone to be outspoken and to talk and write about everything and criticize all of those things, it's very difficult. And as a Kurdish woman, you have to really pay a high price to be outspoken, at the same time to remain active in the scene, because various people have various interests. So they don't like it if you kind of expose their agendas and interests. So that's why I think it's not easy to pin down Kurdish struggles or Kurdish women's rights or Kurdish feminisms. But I think it's best to define it as a wide range of opinions and struggles and feminisms who have really putting forward alternatives, but also analysis and theorizing as well, which I think it's a healthy sign, rather than everybody to go and think the same, act the same, or say the same thing or do the same thing. What I think one of the beauties of really growing up as a Kurdish woman and person from a leftist background, obviously, is that there are a variety of opinions and there are a variety of struggles, and that they all go in parallel. And obviously you just have to stick to what you think is correct to say and to do, and to be part of a larger struggle, which is against capitalism, against class-based society, against gender apartheid, and so on and so forth. So this is, I think I should stop here because my time is ending, and I'm happy for any questions or contributions. Thank you for listening.
Spas, Housan. We learned a word in Kurdish. Spas, very important word. Thank you, gracias.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, Spas, Housan, very interesting to listen to you. Before we take the question of Viridiana, I want to say something in Spanish to the audience. Publicamos una serie de entrevistas, una de ellas es con Housan, aquí la ven, creo que sí ven la pantalla, ¿no? Entonces, como complemento a lo que dijo Housan, as a complement to your conference, ustedes pueden ver y leer la entrevista que le hicimos a Housan. Estamos trabajando a ver si podemos traducir. We are working to see if we can translate the book, Housan book, to Spanish. This is the book I want to show you. Is inside the interview.
Yeah.
Kurdish women stories. So thank you, Hussein. And Viridiana is making a question for you.
Sure.
In what aspects can we see feminism reflected, Kurdish feminism reflected? And do you consider that the situation of current feminism has changed a bit or is still the same?
Thank you. It's an interesting question. I think people like us, for example, this book that you just show, Manuel, is a sign of an initiative whereby we thought that Kurdish women's voices are missing and that they need to have that collective voice and that their experiences and struggles should be reflected. So this is why I, with a team of friends, we collected all these stories from the 4 parts of Kurdistan and we published it so that the outside world also know that Kurdish women, and for Kurdish women themselves as well, because we had many men writing about their struggles and heroism and so on. But I thought that where is the woman? I mean, they've always been in these political struggles, but where are their voices? Where are their contributions? So I thought we should collect their stories and publish it so that women can see that and can have their history recorded. So these are the kind of initiatives we are doing at the moment, whereas 10 years ago, 20 years ago, there was no such a thing. Also, we are becoming much more creative in terms of our own approach to our existence and experiences, and there are various women's groups on internet, the social media. I mean, Kurdish women, I mean, these are like hidden groups as well. Like I have a feminist school. I mean, we are 20 women. We gather every 2 weeks. We talk about feminisms and women's Kurdish women and analyzing and so on. And we read books and discuss it. So I think there has a lot of there's a lot of interest and willingness to actually look into our lives and our being and our existence as Kurdish women, whereas before we were all very busy and all thinking about, you know, we should liberate our country, and okay, even if we liberate our country, but what about us? So I think there is all these questions now coming up, and then people like us have been very outspoken in terms of making sure that wherever, I mean, we should as Kurdish women be more visible and have our own voice and space and place in history and as well as in present. But also, you know, there are, as I said, many young female feminist groups as well. They translate texts from various languages to Kurdish, and they publish things, books, they make seminars, online things, or even in present. So I think it is changing, and I think there's much more visibility of feminist thinking in Kurdish society.
Thank you, Hussein. We have one more question for you before Samira starts her presentation. Have social media helped a little more to spread the word about Kurdish feminism and to create a wider group of support, or the internet in general?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. Yes, I think really social media helped a lot. I mean, just we were connected via social media, Manuel, and now we are having this conference. So it did help a lot in terms of spreading the word, and created solidarity groups and networks and joint initiatives and endeavors. So I think it has been really, really good. And more Kurdish women are speaking different languages as well. I mean, because of a huge diaspora we have in various countries around the world, and like people more and more speak or write in those languages, like I do things in English to make sure I raise awareness in the English-speaking world. So, you know, these are as well helping us, but also social media has been very useful in my own experience as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Housan. So, si tienen más preguntas para Housan, vayan poniéndolas en el chat. If you have more questions to Housan, please put it in the chat and she can answer there, because we are move forward with our second guest, Samira Bayramova. Let me try to speak a little of Georgian. Mogesalmevit da Madlov. Welcome and thank. It's okay?
Yes, Mogesalmevit is hi. Thank you. Yes, Madloba. Hello, everyone. I just want to thank you for you it is a great platform for me to talk about Georgia and feminism, Georgia and ethnic minorities and feminism. Just I wanted to speak in general what happened in Georgia, and after I will be talk about ethnic minorities and Georgia and ethnic minorities and feminism. Feminism and gender have been widely discussed in Georgia during the last maybe 10 and 20 years. Until then, we all lived in Soviet system. Maybe you know about Soviet system because Georgia was 90 years a part of Soviet Russian Soviet system, and it was changed a lot of something. Also took a lot of something from us culture, valuable and other. The Soviet system had a great influence in our mentality and culture. This is, of course, is not positive effect for us. Yes, people could have social equality, but they had no rights. This is where the problem begins today, and we want to convince people that they have rights. Of course, it is so very difficult work in this direction. Really, it is not easy. There is second factor here, the Caucasian mentality. Caucasian mentality, a little difficult mentality. We have special and general mentality and culture. This mentality mainly recognize the broad rights of man. We are trying to get rid of the Soviet system and change the Caucasus mentality. The more difficult it is to create a new system, the more difficult it is to change the old practice. Of course, is mentality practice and all Soviet Union's practice. The most important thing is that we started from somewhere, and we are now in a period of difficulties and conflicts. The confrontation of customs, generation, and times. Maybe we can talk. It is good challenges and not bad challenges. Despite a rise in the awareness of women's rights in Georgia, feminist activists have found themselves up against a deeply rooted culture that hinders further progress. Early marriages, a lack of recognition of the need for more female decision makers, and impositive towards women uses in the male-dominated Georgian parliament create a compounding socially driven force that stands on the way of gender equality. Also, it is very important and very serious problem. In Georgia, we have violence against women. We have very bad statistic about this side. About 200 women have been killed in Georgia over the past 7 years. The reason had the basis of non-recognition of women's rights and their protests. Unfortunately, the state can't protect this woman. This police investigation is very slow. In 1919, 7,500 women were victims of domestic violence. In 2009, this number was just 163. One of the reasons for such contrast is that people now understand that beating a woman is a crime, not a habit. Previously, they didn't apply to the police the domestic violence. They are already appalling, and therefore have such high statistics. One of the reasons for this high statistic is the unfairness of the investigation. Such an approach by the state to this crime increases its number. And the aggressor does not give his intention. So we need strong court and police system. Also, I want to talk about second big problems is early marriages. Early marriage remains a serious problem in Georgia. In 1990, 102,000 girls and 200 boys got married at an early age, 16, 19. Social inequality in the region creates this problem. The level of education in school is very low. There are no resources for children. Thousands of children in Georgia still can't go to kindergarten. Yes, I see this is her rights, but it is not available kindergartens for thousands of children. There are no resources for socialization of young people and children in their villages and in regions. They see houses of culture, cafe, parks, and entertainment centers only on TV. There are many villages that don't have access public transport. It is 21st century. I think it is a big problem. An interesting and entertaining event in the villages is only place of weddings and funerals. All this leads to an increase in early marriages and girls' lack of education. There are very few women in political today in Georgian parliament, in Georgian politics. The situation is worse in the regions. They don't have the opportunities and resources to join social and political process. In Georgia, the dissemination of private live videos and blackmail of political figures is a demotivation for women. I see Georgia, it is a mental, have mental problems, and we have a very difficult mentality, and it is so very, makes a lot of difficulties. I have just mentioned that the Caucasus mentality is difficult and doesn't give women rights. Now imagine how could they ever be active in Georgia and mainly in region. I want to tell you about now minorities, not only ethnic minorities. Also, I am Samira Bayramova, ethnic minority in Georgia, Azerbaijani. Minority rights are increasingly violated. This is includes religions, ethnic, and sexual minorities. Sexual minorities are in the most difficult situation in terms of danger. They are not accepted by the majority of society, perceived as harmful and unsick people. They can't move free and on the streets like us. Someone will definitely insult or beat them. Today, I go in Tbilisi city center. Someone killed transgender woman because he thinks that transgender people not human, and they have not rights to live with us. Ethnic and religious minorities can't live in Georgia as free and equal citizens. Their political activism is symbolic and simple quota. Women are very passive in elections. They are not given equal opportunities and can't work in decision-making position, political and in regional majority. Integration of ethnic minorities into Georgian society remains a slow process, despite repeated declarations by the government that work is on the way. Also, Georgia has made progress in building a democratic state in the last 2 decades. The foundation of sustainable democratic institutions are still weak. Minority communities' distrust of state political institution and the weakness of this institution lead to alienation and isolation. I want to say in Georgia, NGO sector works very actively, but we have bad politics, and this politic not support NGO system and civil activism. If you civil active, if you NGO, it is meaning you have some problem and you are not a good person, you are propaganda and AIDS. And like this capital feminism maybe is less discussed in region. People are less interested in such issues because there are many social problems in regions. I have many meetings on early marriage and domestic violence in schools and village centers. They used to be very surprised that this was not a problem. They thought that if girls got married at an early marriage, it was not a problem. Or if a woman was beaten, it was not a problem because maybe there was something wrong. Soviet ideology had changed people's culture and values, but now they understand that this is problem, but they continue to do so. When something happens over and over again, they think it is probably a habit and should be. After the Soviet Union, the economic and political situation in Georgia was so difficult after 1990 years, and they married their little girls too easy because the burden on the family. And then it became a habit, and when the social condition of the people improved, they continued to do so. Laws have changed, but penalties have not changed in our region in Georgia, because it is the indifferences and irresponsibility of the state. The struggle between the government and the opposition has been going on in Georgia for the last 8 years. They are less interested in people's problems. They less interested women's problems. They less interested ethnic minorities and sexual minorities problems. Also, everything is well written in Georgian codex, but the laws have no function. Unfortunately, they have not any function. We will not be able to build an equal society when women's and ethnic minorities' political activity is symbolic and with quotas. Imagine the difficult situation in region now. It is so really very difficult because we are live in inequality situation, and it happened a lot of discrimination. We can't get quality education. That is why there are so many social problems. Many schools don't even have infrastructure. Elections are held almost every year in Georgia. Because all interest in going to election process, the school staff is engaged in an official propaganda. they are forced to do so. Do you think such teachers can cultivate every person? Of course, no. Teachers don't even know her rights, because school, it is very best places for children. Maybe they to study here about gender, feminism, but in our school not happened nothing. Only non-government organization and other sectors works this site when they graduate school, and when they are going to Tbilisi and to university, and after they maybe hearing about what is the gender, what is the equality, what is ethnic minority and AIDS. It is so school, it is very close places, and maybe it is small imperator. Maybe we can talk. Schools and kindergartens are always a good resource in Georgia to win election, only not to give good and quality education for people. People living in the region never go to the cinema or the theater because there is no such place. I live in Marneola, and it is 15 kilometers from the house to Marneola. It is far from the capital of Tbilisi, 40 kilometers. I have a problem with everyday public transport. You must suffer for horse to go home after 6 o'clock in the 21st century. People still don't know what mud-free roads is, and many villages don't have drinking water. There is nothing interesting in those villages except the school building. We have not yet been able to solve the problem of water and roads and some social problems. Therefore, we still can't move on cultural and gender issues. There is no park, no entertainment center for young people. We have a lot of problems, which is social, political, economical, and maybe I need hours, days to talk about Georgians' problems and ethnic minorities' problems, mainly regional problems. That was what I wanted to say about problems. I hope I was able to give you some information about the situation in my country, in my village, my regions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samira Bayramova. Habiendo escuchado a Houssan, habiendo escuchado a Samira, antes de empezar a hablar con Masoma y con Jorge, la segunda parte de la charla, quiero hacer una reflexión y compartírselas a ustedes. Esto nos enseña varias cosas, muchachos. El Medio Oriente no solo son conflictos bélicos, militares entre países, no solo son guerras. Middle East is not only wars. Middle East is also other political and social process, a cultural process. Middle East is not only Tel Aviv, Palestina, Estambul. Los países de Medio Oriente son diversos. Creo que la exposición de Houssan y la exposición de Samira, Samira and Houssan exposition open our eyes, nos abren nuestros ojos to try to understand the Middle East and Caucasus in another perspective. We are living in Chile, in Mexico, in Argentina. We're living in Latin America. We have the obligation to try to understand the Middle East in other way. For example, Samira is talking to us. Samira nos está hablando sobre discriminación en varios niveles, in several levels. Not only in Georgia, inside Georgia, a very modern country. If you visit Tbilisi, it's a very modern city. But not many people goes beyond Tbilisi. Samira is talking to us about the other Georgia. In Netflix, you can find the only thing about Georgia in Netflix is a short documentary. The name is Sabdagari. Samira, I say good? El Comerciante, Sabdagari.
Yeah.
Try to find it. Maybe Housan in the chat can suggest to us some films, some documentaries about the Kurdish beyond Istanbul. Maybe 5 or 6 million people in Istanbul are from Kurdish descent, but we have to move forward beyond the cities. Porque lo que nos acaba de exponer Samira es ver a Georgia de sus regiones, más allá de Tbilisi, más allá de la gente de élite, de la gente educada. Entonces, tenemos que viajar, aunque sea mentalmente, a Medio Oriente y al Cáucaso, más allá de las ciudades. ¿Ok? Es como venir a Chile y solo hablar de Santiago. ¿Ok? Entonces, thank you, Housan. Thank you, Samira, for me, and I am sure for all. Sorry, my dogs are very noisy. So, Dana, please introduce Masoma. I will be back soon.
Hi, Masoma. Masoma, as I said minutes ago, she's a woman from Afghanistan. So I think that because of the what's happening right there, it's of the interest of all of us know about the feminist struggle there. So now I'll give you all the space and not all the time that I wish, but a little time to explain us about your fight and your feminism and whatever you want, your life.
Muchas gracias, Dana. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan bien? Muy bien. Perdona, me están llamando. Un momentito. Ok. Voy a intentar hablar español si quieren, pero hace muchísimo tiempo que no lo he hablado, hace 2 años creo, así que puede ser que tenga que cambiar al inglés en algún momento. Voy a intentarlo al español primero. Muchas gracias por la organización de esta charla. Me parece muy interesante también escuchar a los demás. Y es sorprendente cómo se parecen algunas historias, algunas estructuras de discriminación. Samira and Housan, do you prefer me to speak in English? Is it better to speak in English maybe?
That would be ideal because I would really like to know what you say about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, let's switch to
Thank you.
English then. It is funny that I should talk as an Afghan woman. I should talk about feminism and diversity about Afghanistan, because feminism is not exactly the word that we associate with Afghanistan. It seems quite an opposite, right? But it's still very, very important to talk about the situation of Afghan girls and women, because there's never the single story. There's not always the simple story also to know about a country, as we just learned also about Georgia and also about Palestine, that the stories are so diverse. The women are so diverse, the ethnic groups are so diverse, so there's not only one story. About Afghanistan and feminism, I can generally say that Afghanistan is one of the I think there are only 5 countries which are worse for women to live in than in Afghanistan. So according to, just a minute, I'm looking for the number here. According to ¿cómo se dice esto en inglés? El índice de desigualdad de género. There's a
Gender Inequality Index.
Index, yes, exactly. There's an index from the United Nations about the gender equality in the world, and Afghanistan is on the 157th place out of 162 countries. So there are only 5 countries which are even worse. In the last 20 years, which means after the invasion by the international troops, especially by the United Nations, by the USA, There has been lots of development going on, not as fast as we wished for, not as fast as it could have taken place, but not as much as could have taken place. But at least there was some major changes for girls and women and minorities. But now with the transition of power to the Taliban, things have dramatically changed, especially for minorities, especially for women and girls and children in general. It is really difficult to even decide where to start with this very sad story. I don't know about the students' background knowledge. Manuel, maybe you can help me out with this. Should we talk about the situation in Afghanistan at the moment, or more general about the minorities and history? What would you prefer?
I think it's very important to show to the students the situation of the women in Afghanistan. Maybe the general situation is more or less know it because we have some news, etc. But we don't know almost nothing about the women in Afghanistan, and especially about the Hazara women in Afghanistan. So for us, it will be great if you can talk to us about that.
Sure. I wasn't really aware of how much of the world news, of the current news, is actually also spread in Latin America, in Mexico, Chile, and Argentina. But I guess, yes, as you said, the main points are probably also shown there, and those interested in the topic in the country will know more in detail about what is going on there. So let me talk more about the situation of the minorities and then dig more into the topic of women and girls. Afghanistan is a very, very complex, very difficult country. And this is also one of the reasons why it is almost impossible to think of a peaceful time. There has been a peaceful time, but it's a long time ago. And even when there was not officially war in that country, there was still conflicts going on. Afghanistan is also geographically a very mountainous region. There are huge areas of desert. So it is it really depends on where the people live, how they live there, how much access to infrastructure they have, which all of those components in the end decide also the step of development of that group of people living there. So I'm talking about the huge difference between cities and provinces and regions, okay, and villages. There's a huge difference, unfortunately. So whatever we learn from the international news about Afghanistan is usually based on the big cities. It almost always focuses on what is going on in Kabul, the capital city, in Herat, which is also a big city, in Kandahar, and that's quite it. Also after 2001, when many countries of the NATO invaded or entered Afghanistan to end terrorism there, to end or to find Osama bin Laden, actually, which was the main focus, the main point of going there, and also the revenge of the 9/11 attacks in New York. Most of the NGOs that came with those troops focused on Kabul. So Kabul was suddenly flooded with international NGOs, with UN projects, with all kinds of humanitarian projects. And this is why lots of changes also happened in Kabul. But if we see the images of very modern girls, of very Western men also walking in Kabul, on the streets of Kabul, women holding very important jobs in high positions, this is almost exclusively happening in the capital city, or it happened, unfortunately. That is over now. So what we don't see is the much bigger part of Afghanistan, which is not the cities, which are the provinces. And there you can almost see no difference between now or after the 2001 invasion and before that. So there's not much change that happened, and that is one of the reasons why the Taliban, the terrorist group of the Taliban, became stronger and stronger and even had a chance. And what I've just said, it's still difficult to say because it's not even that simple, but it is one of the reasons. So I'm trying not to lose my focus here. So the huge difference of the place where you live is also a reason of how to speak about feminism now in Afghanistan. In Kabul, there were many families, and even like the group of very modern or very feminist people grew bigger and bigger in the last couple of years, or let's say the last 20 years. Many people from outside of Afghanistan who were refugees in all around the world, and who in their host countries had managed to study, to really get a formal education, they returned to Kabul when it was possible after 2001. So many people who already were part of the more elite groups, more educated groups, returned to Afghanistan. They got some very important jobs. They were the ones who also gave their face, were the face for the international media, which is a good thing, but it is not representative of all Afghan society. This is one of the problems, because the international media also loved all the special stories. An Afghan woman doing cycling, for example, doing competitive sports, which is great, but it is a very small group of people who do this and who are able to do that. It is okay to highlight that, but it sometimes gives a wrong image of Afghanistan also. The vast majority of people, unfortunately, still live in very traditional ways of life, in very traditional family structures, very patriarchal, so they have no chance whatsoever. And inside Afghanistan, the narrative of those feminists, of those who really achieve huge things achieved big things in Afghanistan, that narrative does not reach the other girls and women inside Afghanistan. The images of the singular women and girls that achieved great Western things, let's say, despite all the difficulties in Afghanistan, they are famous internationally, but not in Afghanistan. So that is unfortunately why the idea of role models did not work there. I wish it had, because one could think highlighting or really focusing on those great achievements of the singular people could actually help motivating other girls to fight for their rights, to go onto the street, to fight their the family's opinion maybe, and just do their own ways. This did not really work. Maybe in Afghan societies around the world, like Afghan refugee families, Afghan refugees living somewhere in the world in Western countries, but it did not work for Afghan women in Afghanistan. So
thank you, Masoma. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the situation of the Hazara women in Afghanistan.
Sorry, yes, of course. There's so much to talk about that I sometimes don't know where really to continue. The situation in Afghanistan is very complex. I said at the beginning, one of the reasons is also because the country does not exist of only one population. There's not the Afghan. This is a huge problem. Afghanistan is a multi-diverse population with many, many different ethnic minorities. There are many different religious groups, even though the vast majority, I think almost 99%, are Muslims. But inside the Muslim, the Islam, inside the Muslim religion, there are many branches. And the population, the different ethnic groups also have different religious branches. So that is one of the difficulties of uniting this Afghanistan. In the last 20 years, or at least the first 10 years, the first decade of after 2001, there was some efforts by the government to make, to market, let's say, to make people feel that we are united. There was some on television, for example, they showed many shows, many songs, whatever, to make people feel we're all one, we all belong to each other, we are united, we are one united Afghanistan, and do not split into different groups, different ethnic groups or religious groups. But it did not really work, because it cannot work. You cannot just forget history, and you cannot forget your identity, and you cannot forget history is one of the very important points for Hazaras, especially. Hazara is one of the ethnic minorities that I also belong to, and we have been discriminated against massively in the last century, let's say, for centuries really. So it is not working to just listen to television and hear a new government that we might not even have elected tell us, well, we are all one, and there's peace now, and we have to love each other, and we're all Afghans. It would be so nice to believe in that, but there's a collective pain in the Hazara communities, in the Hazara population, because in 1890 till 1900, there was a king in Afghanistan who actually made a huge war against Hazaras, and there was a genocide. It is still not recognized, unfortunately, by the United Nations or any official sites, but there was a huge genocide, and about more than 60% of the Hazara population was exterminated at that time. So they were really cruelly massacred, and that was the ethnic cleansing that they wanted to do. Because Hazaras are very easily to recognize. Maybe you can see it in my facial figures also, that we might look a little bit like Mongolians. We have usually those eyes that detect us, and also our language is a little bit different. It is called Hazaragi. We have our own culture inside Afghanistan. We have our own songs and instruments, our own way to dress. And unfortunately, we also have our own regions where to live. That is also historically made. So because because Hazaras were not considered to be real Afghans by other ethnic groups like the Pashtuns, which are the majority and the most dominant ones, they made us go to some places to live. And one of those main places for Hazaras is called Hazarajat. So there's even a region inside Afghanistan dedicated to Hazaras. They pushed us in there and said, well, this is, at least you can live there, but don't mix with the rest of us. It did not work exactly like that. So there are some regions populated more by Hazaras, but also many regions where Pashtuns and Tajiks and Uzbeks and other minorities live just next door to Hazaras. The Hazara population is not consistent in itself either. It depends on which region you live. It depends a little bit on, I don't know even exactly, I cannot point my finger on what it makes to belong to this or that kind of Hazaras. But there are huge groups of Hazara people that are very modern, where there's not such a strong patriarchy like in the population of the Pashtuns, for example. Pashtuns are the Talibans, for example, or like the Talibans are Pashtuns. Not all Pashtuns are Taliban, but the Taliban now in power, they belong to the Pashtuni ethnic group. And in the Hazaras, there are many people who are very advanced actually in their thinking. They are very motivated, very engaged in society, and they took their chances in the last 20 years. And this is why you can see many Hazara people actually in strong positions, and also in competitions they used to inside Afghanistan also. They are usually very successful. So they were very present. For being a minority, actually, they were overly represented, I think, in the Afghan population. And that was not exactly what the Pashtuns and other ethnic groups wanted. But with the presence of the international troops and many NGOs, it was impossible for them to really stop us from being so successful. As I'm, yeah, with that being said, I also have to mention that there's some parts of Hazaras that are quite the opposite. They are still very conservative. They would not let their girls go to school, even if they are allowed to go. They still force their girls to marry some woman, some man the family chooses, and these are not really represented in the higher positions of the population. So it is difficult to also in Afghanistan to speak about one ethnic minority of the Hazaras and then speak for all Hazaras. Even inside that population, there are differences again. So it's really, really complicated. And next to that, there's also the fact that not everybody in Afghanistan actually knows their ethnic identity, the ethnic group, because sometimes for some, this is the most important identity pattern, to know which ethnic group you belong to. But for the others, they actually identify themselves with the region they live in. So they would say, for example, I'm a Kabuli, I'm from Kabul. That's it. They don't know, are they Tajiks, or the Pashtuns or Hazaras or whatever. So some regions are not even so clear about the ethnic groups, but they identify with the place they live in or the area they live in. Yes, maybe I could take in some questions to know in which direction to go here.
Thank you, Masoma. Además, Masoma habla muy bien español, así que entiende todo lo que decimos. Ya está nuestro último ponente, Jorge. Antes de darle la palabra a Jorge, before our next speaker, I want to add something to what Masoma say. I'm going to say in Spanish, because I want to be clear. Miren, muchachos, los que están asistiendo a la charla, a lo mejor pensamos que los temas que nos habla Samira, que nos habla Housan, que nos habla Masoma, son temas que nos quedan lejos. Maybe we can think that the issues about the gender in Afghanistan, about the women in the Kurdish movement, about the minorities in Georgia, are far away from our daily life. Pero no es así, muchachos. But it's not the case. Even in Chile, incluso en Chile, you can say this news of the BBC, we have one Hazara here in Chile. Tenemos una Hazara en Chile y tiene muchos problemas de adaptación, and it's a very problematic process of adaptation to Chile. So it's not only to listen history from far away. We are living in the globalization. Inside the globalization, we have to deal with this kind of injustice. We can say, it's okay, we are far away from Afghanistan, it's not my business. We are very far away from Georgia, and we don't have to say anything about the women in Georgia or the Kurdish struggle. Is nothing to do with us. Es al revés, muchachos, es al revés. Mientras no logremos conectarnos a estas otras experiencias y entendamos que desde México, que desde Chile podemos tender puentes a estas otras experiencias, no estamos entendiendo hacia dónde va el mundo. Por eso esta charla, idea de Dana y de Dani, es beneficiosa y solo la podríamos tener en Zoom. ¿Quién hubiera pensado poder platicar aquí desde Santiago, Ciudad de México, con alguien kurda, con alguien de Georgia, con una muchacha házara que es exiliada y que sufrió la guerra como Masoma. Vamos a hablar ahora con Jorge, que vive en Israel y es parte de la comunidad LGTB. Ese es otro gran tema que tocaba Samira, la discriminación sexual. Y Medio Oriente es una zona donde las diferencias sexuales no son reconocidas por casi ningún país. Ustedes pueden ver lo que le pasa a los homosexuales en Chechenia, lo que le pasa a los homosexuales en Turquía, donde el presidente Recep Tayyip Erdogan les dice cucarachas. Lo dice él, son sus palabras, ¿ok? Y el problema en Afganistán, en términos de minorías sexuales, debe ser también terrible bajo el talibán. En ese sentido, nuestro último ponente es Jorge, Dana lo va a presentar, y al final, at the end of our last speaker, I hope we can chat a little bit between Samira, Hosan, Masoma, because it's very important to open bridge to other experiences. So please, Dana, introduce our last speaker.
Hi, Jorge. Hola, Jorge. Do you speak Spanish? Está
Sí, es
silenciado.
argentino.
Ah, es argentino. Jorge, está silenciado tu micrófono. Bueno, ya di una pequeña introducción antes, pero bueno, Jorge es representante del movimiento LGTBIQ+ en Israel. Nos va a hablar de como perspectivas del movimiento en Israel y Palestina. Y bueno, eso, también es fundador de Oriente Medio News. Y Jorge, bueno, te doy el espacio para que nos cuentes un poco de cómo se vive los derechos sexuales en Israel y Palestina. Si quieres en español, si quieres en inglés, para que entienda el resto de la expositura, como tú prefieras y te sientas más cómodo.
Bueno, saludos a todos. Voy a dar la ponencia en castellano. Me presento brevemente, soy argentino, vivo hace 11 años en Israel, soy periodista y en tanto tal preparé la charla un poco de una perspectiva más periodística que académica, es decir, no tanto enfocándose en la rigurosidad de los datos, sino más bien una mirada impresionista general sobre la situación de género en Israel y Palestina. El enfoque mío parte de dar un contexto local y regional por el cual se pueden entender la situación de las mujeres y de la población LGBT en Israel y en Palestina. ¿Por qué digo esto? Porque, bueno, yo como argentino sé muy bien que Argentina está a la vanguardia de los derechos de género en el mundo, a la par de Suecia. Hay matrimonio igualitario, hay documento de nacionalidad, documento nacional de identidad no binario, las leyes se escriben en lenguaje inclusivo, en fin, muy avanzado, pero la realidad cotidiana todavía las travestis sufren discriminación. ¿No se ve la cámara? Pregunta a alguien si se ve la cámara. ¿Me ven a mí? Ok. Las travestis en Buenos Aires son discriminadas por la policía o violentadas en la calle, lo cual matiza la cuestión de lo legal y lo concreto social. En Israel, si bien no está tan avanzado a nivel legal como en Argentina o como Suecia, la situación social plantea que hay mucho menos violencia física hacia las minorías sexuales. Bueno, voy a empezar compartiendo la pantalla con el PowerPoint que preparé para hoy. Un segundito, ¿dónde está para compartir? Pantalla, share screen. Muy bien. El contexto regional y local. la situación de las minorías sociales debe ser entendida en principio en el contexto cultural y político. Los países del Medio Oriente, por lo general, no responden a las características más conocidas de los estados occidentales, conocidas como laicos, con fronteras estables, y cuyas identidades étnicas particulares están subordinadas a una identidad más universal y abstracta. Por ejemplo, el caso clásico es Francia, donde todos son franceses y las identidades particulares están en un segundo plano. Actualmente, el panorama del Medio Oriente está dividido entre estados fallidos, que son Siria, Líbano, Irak, Yemen, Sudán, estados fundamentalistas religiosos con ambición imperialista, Turquía, Irán, Qatar, Afganistán, Pakistán, y estados etno-religiosos con una apertura a la modernidad, Emiratos Árabes Unidos, Bahrein, Omán, Arabia Saudita, Egipto, Marruecos, Israel. La situación de las minorías es muy grave en la de los estados fallidos. Y, vamos a decir, más desafiante la situación en los estados religiosos o etno-religiosos. Israel es un estado judío y democrático. Tiene varias similitudes con los países del Medio Oriente, por cuanto privilegia su identidad étnica y religiosa, judía. Al mismo tiempo también se diferencia en muchos planos a sus vecinos. Tengo que aclarar un punto sobre lo que planteé anteriormente, sobre qué es un Estado fallido. Un Estado fallido es un Estado que perdió su capacidad soberana, no puede controlar su territorio ni brindar protección a sus ciudadanos. En ellos pueden transitar libremente mafias, guerrillas, que controlan territorios y condicionan las decisiones gubernamentales. De más está decir que es el peor escenario para las minorías. Un estado etno-religioso, siguiendo la tipología que mencioné anteriormente, es un estado en el que la pertenencia étnico-nacional y la religión definen la identidad del Estado. Las minorías suelen quedar excluidas de esa identidad, aunque hay grados diversos de inclusión o presión dentro de la identidad mayoritaria, dependiendo del nivel de cultura laica e integradora del país. Por ejemplo, en los kurdos en Turquía, su identidad nacional está completamente negada, está prohibido hablar el idioma kurdo por ley. Pero, por ejemplo, en Egipto, que tampoco es una democracia liberal de primer mundo, los cristianos coptos tienen mucha más aceptación, tolerancia e integración que los kurdos en Turquía. Entonces, volviendo a esto, en los estados etno-religiosos, las mujeres y las poblaciones LGBT suelen ser perjudicadas por la identidad religiosa, que la ubica como ciudadanos de segunda al no pensar que tienen los mismos derechos de todos. En el interior democrático, Israel es una democracia liberal en la que todos sus ciudadanos tienen los mismos derechos. Esto contrasta, por ejemplo, con el Líbano, que tiene leyes explícitas de apartheid que impiden que la minoría palestina, incluso nacida en el país, trabaje en ciertos rubros de mercado. Y también contrasta, como yo mencioné anteriormente, con Turquía, donde hay leyes que prohíben que se hable el idioma kurdo. En los territorios ocupados, considerados ocupados por la comunidad internacional, el control israelí provee una estabilidad mínima que sería frágilmente destruida en una guerra civil intrapalestina. Menciono esto con la siguiente aclaración. Mencionaba la situación de los estados fallidos, la inestabilidad. En el caso palestino, hay una situación híbrida por la cual hay una cierta estabilidad mayor que la de los países rondantes. La paradoja de la ocupación, que no les otorga derechos de ciudadanía a los palestinos, es que también otorga cierta estabilidad y en cuanto a la sociedad civil, no puede... un segundito, tengo que cerrar la puerta por los niños.
Ese es el problema de las sesiones por Zoom, los perros, los niños, el vecino, pero bueno, nos facilita otras cosas.
Pido disculpas, pero es parte de la vida cotidiana de hoy, en la vida del Zoom. Eso decía que el control militar israelí le provee a la autoridad palestina una cierta estabilidad por la cual, si no hubiese ese control, estaría expuesta a una guerra civil con Hamas y otro tipo de guerrillas. Del caso de Gaza, bueno, Gaza está ocupada por una, vamos a decir así, dictadura teocrática, en la que las mujeres y los gays, por supuesto, no tienen ni cabida. Bien. Hablaba de Israel como Estado democrático. Es un Estado muchísimo más democrático en muchos parámetros que los demás países de Medio Oriente, pero es un Estado donde todavía la democracia está en construcción, vamos a decir así, porque es un país que tiene un conflicto no resuelto, no tiene fronteras definitivas reconocidas a nivel internacional, no tiene resuelto el estatus de la población palestina, si se va a solucionar a partir de una negociación el conflicto, si no hay en el horizonte algún tipo de solución, eso complica a la larga la consolidación definitiva del carácter democrático del país. A eso se suma también una polémica ley de Estado-Nación aprobada hace un año, meses, hubo algunas, bueno, no recuerdo bien las fechas. Esa ley enfatiza que el Estado de Israel es el Estado-nación del pueblo judío y no de otra minoría nacional. Esto despertó polémica por las consecuencias políticas de esa ley en el carácter democrático del país, aunque no afecta a los derechos civiles individuales, con la excepción de que esta ley caracteriza al idioma árabe como idioma especial en lugar de la definición tradicional de idioma oficial. Eso trae muchos signos de preguntas acerca del futuro del Estado de Israel democrático. El matrimonio civil no existe y el Estado reconoce los casamientos que cada comunidad étnica o religiosa regula en sus miembros. Sin embargo, un matrimonio religioso mixto o un matrimonio de personas entre el mismo sexo puede ser reconocido, dado que el Estado respeta las leyes civiles internacionales, aunque se da la situación paradójica de que los ciudadanos deben realizar su trámite fuera del país, y esto los coloca en una situación de ciudadanía de segunda a las mujeres, a las minorías sexuales y a la población laica del país. Desde que se fundó el Estado de Israel en 1948, el Estado reconoce a las minorías su identidad cultural y lingüística, permitiendo que gocen de autonomía para determinar el contenido escolar, respetando además una currícula común aprobada por el Ministerio de Educación. Unas fotos para aliviar tanto texto. Este es un ejemplo de mujeres árabes que se integran en el mercado de trabajo, lo cual habla de una mejora de su situación, que por lo general las sociedades árabes en Israel son muy culturalmente muy enmarcadas en lo tribal. La cultura tribal dificulta mucho la emancipación de la mujer y la ata al mandato familiar de quedarse en la casa y de criar las futuras generaciones. Y bueno, eso está empezando a cambiar lentamente gracias a muchas ayudas estatales que apuntan a modernizar las comunidades árabes israelíes. Las poblaciones árabes de Israel suelen ser geográficamente sedentarias debido a su carácter tribal. Las familias construyen sus casas en cada piso para cada generación y la autonomía cultural, si bien es progresiva en cuanto al reconocimiento de la diferencia, es, digamos, regresiva por cuanto retrasa la modernización de las costumbres, siendo el patriarcado y el machismo muy fuertes. Como dije anteriormente, eso está empezando a cambiar. Hay una escasa interacción entre judíos y árabes como consecuencia de esa distribución geográfica y la autonomía cultural de las minorías. Eso es producto de lo que yo llamo un concepto medio filosófico, que lo tomé de unos autores franceses. Eso es producto de una universalidad débil del Estado israelí. Es un Estado en el que todos los ciudadanos son iguales, pero en el que sus símbolos e idioma principal son judíos. Un Estado de universalidad fuerte, conocido podría ser el Estado francés, que obliga a homogeneizar a todos sus ciudadanos. El Estado de Israel es un Estado que es universal por cuanto reconoce derechos liberales, civiles, a todas las personas como individuos, pero que reconoce a cada comunidad como un ente autónomo, ¿no? Sí, reconoce las identidades particulares, que en Francia no es el caso. Foto, esta es la Knesset, el Parlamento israelí, como pueden ver. Su símbolo principal es la bandera de Israel, que es un símbolo judío. Bien. Otra observación sobre la universalidad débil. Esto desde mi punto de vista como persona que está viviendo en Israel. Esta universalidad débil es parte de un proceso de construcción identitaria del país, que aún está en marcha y no es lineal. El carácter democrático del país y las distintas medidas de fomento de la integración económica, cultural y política de la minoría árabe, que es la más importante y compone el 20% de la población, está dando lugar a la creación de una clase media profesional en la que sus miembros, mujeres y gays, pueden tener más libertades que las que les son negadas en sus entornos tribales. En distintos ámbitos de la cultura israelí ya se reconocen matrimonios mixtos entre judíos y árabes y también hijos de esos matrimonios, que asumen orgullosamente su identidad israelí, integrando la multiplicidad judía y árabe. Con respecto a la situación de la mujer, la ley israelí prohíbe la discriminación basada en el género en asuntos como en el empleo y los salarios, y prevé demandas colectivas. Sin embargo, en conjunto, las disparidades salariales sexistas entre hombres y mujeres siguen siendo un problema en algunas partes del Estado. En una encuesta de 2012 de 59 países desarrollados, Israel ocupó el puesto 11 en cuanto a la participación de las mujeres en el lugar de trabajo. En la misma encuesta, Israel ocupó el puesto 24 en la proporción de mujeres que ocupan puestos ejecutivos de poder. En 2017, Israel fue clasificado como el 8º país más seguro del mundo para las mujeres por el grupo de investigación New World Wealth. a pesar de que muchos de los parámetros de la situación de la mujer están a la par de los países desarrollados, o incluso más avanzada, como es en el caso de la inclusión de las mujeres pilotos dientes en el ejército israelí, al igual que los gays y los trans que también participan. En la cuestión del matrimonio religioso pueden ser discriminadas las mujeres en cuestiones de divorcio por el rabinato. La representación femenina en la política está un poco rezagada y solo en el gobierno actual hay mayor representación femenina en relación a los gobiernos anteriores. A nivel civil, sin embargo, el apoyo económico y servicio social a las mujeres, parejas no formales y LGBT de parte de las municipalidades está a la par de los países desarrollados. Las mujeres y las minorías sexuales en Israel son vectores de modernización y liberalización del país. Es en un país en el cual sus minorías religiosas siguen siendo muy tradicionales. La mayoría judía es laica o tradicional, y la situación de género en ella puede ser comparable a la de un país occidental. No sucede lo mismo en la población judía o ultraortodoxa, que compone un 10% de la población, y en la población árabe, que compone un 20% de la población. En ambas poblaciones, la mujer es totalmente subordinada al mandato del grupo y de los esposos e hijos. Los partidos ultraortodoxos judíos que tienen representación en la Knesset no tienen ninguna mujer en sus listas. La presencia y la fortaleza de esas minorías misóginas y homófobas retrasa la completa liberalización del país, dado que aplican normas comunitarias diferentes a la del Estado de Derecho. Los aspectos mencionados dificultan la consumación de una democracia plena, no solamente dentro de Israel, sino también dentro de los territorios administrados por los palestinos. Este es otro vector que retrasa la liberalización y la expresión de las minorías. El conflicto no se debe solo al hecho de que Israel no puede definir definitivamente su frontera e integrar a la población palestina, o no integrarla, pero otorgarla un Estado que sería, para la mayoría de los israelíes, una segura amenaza securitaria, sino también por el efecto de radicalización que genera en ambas partes de sectores que no tienen a la democracia como horizonte. En el caso palestino, Hamas en Gaza es una dictadura de mano de hierro en el que, por supuesto, las minorías no tienen sus derechos, y la autoridad palestina es una gerontocracia autoritaria que no llama a elecciones hace 15 años y en el que las mujeres y LGBT tienen una situación muy complicada, apenas mejor que la de Gaza, dado que si bien la ley palestina, heredera de la ley del mandato británico, no criminaliza a la población LGBT, sin embargo, no les otorga protección, quedando las minorías sexuales expuestas a la sanción social y a su violencia. Cabe decir que la presencia de numerosas organizaciones no gubernamentales, europeas, israelíes, intentan dar un cierto balance a esta situación, y muchos gays que corren peligro en los territorios palestinos piden asilo a Israel, y las organizaciones de base los ayudan para poder recibir ese asilo. Acá unas imágenes, men only, está claro, no hay lugar para las mujeres en el mundo ultraortodoxo. Y una manifestación árabe donde tampoco se ven mujeres. Entonces, para ir cerrando, la pregunta aquí es: ¿cuál es el lugar del conflicto palestino-israelí? que muchas veces toda la situación de género en el exterior se ve exclusivamente desde el conflicto. Como acabo de exponer hasta ahora, no es así. El conflicto no tiene un lugar preponderante en esta situación. Más bien, la dinámica social y política de cada uno de los dos bandos de conflicto, sea de Israel y de Palestina, tienen sus propias dinámicas internas, sociales, y es a partir de ellas que se puede explicar cuál es la situación de las mujeres y el LGBT. Lo que sí puedo, desde mi humilde punto de vista, no partidario ni analítico, vamos a decir así, es que el lugar de conflicto, ¿en qué consiste el conflicto? En que se trata de un callejón sin salida, por un lado por la pretensión nacionalista palestina de no poner fin al conflicto, con la solución de dos estados o con cualquier tipo de solución. Si bien es cierto que suele expresar en sus discursos estar a favor de esas soluciones, por lo general esas soluciones son soluciones para negociar y llegar a un estado de no beligerancia, pero no de paz completa. Entonces, eso ocasiona también como consecuencia el prolongado control militar securitario israelí que impide a la población árabe palestina que vive en los territorios de Cisjordania, que se llama Cisjordania porque fue un territorio que perteneció a Jordania. Les impide tener igualdad de derechos soberanos y civiles como los israelíes. La observación que sigue la hice anteriormente, que eso también complica la completa liberalización y democratización de ambos pueblos. Y para finalizar, hay vínculos donde pueden llegar a profundizar distintos aspectos de la charla que acabo de dar, ¿no? La situación de las mujeres, la situación del LGBT, la polémica por la ley del Estado judío, la novedad de la mayor participación femenina en el gobierno actual y la situación de los gays en territorios palestinos. Bueno, acá terminé. Muchas gracias por dejarme participar.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. I want to hear the last word of Samira and Hossam before to finish our long, but I hope useful conference. So Samira, please, and after that, Hossam.
Thank you Trey again. Really, it was very interesting for me to hear other countries' practice and gender situation. Also, I heard new information about Kurdish people. Afghanistan also now very interesting for us after war. Also, I write questions answer in chat. I hope it will be useful for our students. Also, I am students, I want to say. Also, Manuel, I want to thank you a lot for you. You are interesting Georgia, about Georgia and ethnic minorities and AIDS, and good luck. And I hope will be continuous and see each other after COVID viruses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samira. Samira put in the chat her profile of Facebook. Also, Hossam already put it in the chat. Hossam, your last word.
Thank you so much, Manuel, and thank you everyone for joining us and listening to this conversation. And it was interesting to listen to everyone else. And I hope we kind of widen our solidarity networks. And as Manuel, as you said as well, we need to understand different struggles and histories and people's struggles around the world, really. Sometimes media, or most of the times, the official media is biased and doesn't really show the actual struggles that is going on, or the actual problems and things that is on the ground. But I think through this type of networking and information sharing and knowledge production, counter knowledge production, I think we will manage to give a picture that is more realistic and that is more humane as well. And I hope we remain in touch, and I put my Facebook there for those who are interested to you know, to hear about our information and so on, and also our website, cultureproject.org.uk. Feel free to visit it because it's in English as well. So, you know, thank you so much for today, and it was a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you.
Housam. Jorge, tus palabras de despedida.
Bueno, agradezco que me hayan dado la participación y espero que haya más encuentros y debates como estos.
Bueno, muchachos, gracias a Dana, gracias a Dani, gracias a todos los que llegaron al final de esta charla. Espero que abramos, as Housam said before, new ways to understand Middle East, to put in touch with other realities. So, thank you very much. See you soon.
Take care.
Paz, Madelova.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very
much. Bye, muchachos.
Bye bye. Have a nice
day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.